Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Sanhedrin. We are up to Perek Zayin Mishnah Bet. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'ilui Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbai, Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Chana bad Miriam, Sason ben Raya, and Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen. And Leavdil ben Chaim lechaim v'derefua shelemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betor Shah Chulei Yisrael, and Achlama Merav Binyamin Or Tzion Chai ben Dvorah. The Mishnah discusses the procedure for execution by burning. Mitzvat and Israfin, this is the procedure for those who have been sentenced to burning. Hayu mishaki'in oto bezevel ad al kubotav. They sink the criminal into a pile of manure until his knees so that he cannot move his legs. If he could move his legs, he would jump about to avoid the hot lead as it is about to be poured down his throat, and the lead might fall on his skin. The lead must not be allowed to fall on his skin because that would cause him more pain than necessary. V'notnin sudar kasha letoch haraka. They put a rough scarf inside a soft scarf. V'chorech al tzavaro, and wind the scarves around his neck. Ze moshech etzlo v'ze moshech etzlo. Someone standing on one side pulls the scarves toward himself, and someone standing on the opposite side pulls them toward himself. Ad shepotech et piv, until the condemned opens his mouth. The purpose of pulling the scarves is to choke him, thereby forcing him to open his mouth. A soft scarf would not be strong enough to force his mouth open quickly, while a rough scarf would bruise his neck, causing more pain than necessary. Therefore, they used a rough scarf wrapped inside a soft one. Someone lights a fire under a bar of lead, and once the lead is melted, pours it into his mouth. Actually, the commentators explain the lead is heated before the scarves are pulled, so that it is ready to be poured down his throat as soon as his mouth is opened. And it goes down into his stomach, burning his innards. Now, Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's sons, died when a heavenly fire entered their nostrils and burned them on the inside. Although the outside of their bodies remained intact, the Torah describes their deaths as burning. This teaches that execution by burning can be done from the inside without destroying the visible body. Since burning can be done this way, it should be done this way because the Torah's commandment, you shall love your friend as yourself, in Vaikrat chapter 19 verse 18, teaches that the execution of a criminal must be carried out with as little pain as possible, just as any other person would want to suffer the least pain possible if he had to be executed. We therefore burn his insides, since that is quicker and less painful than burning his entire body. The next Tana rules that they did not squeeze his neck. Rabbi Yehuda says, Af hu im met biadam la yu mekaymin bo mitzvat tzrefa. But then, if he dies at their hands while they are squeezing his neck, meaning they choke him to death, they have not fulfilled the mitzvah of execution by burning. Ela potchin et piv bitzvat shelo betovato. Instead, they force his mouth open with tongues. Someone lights a fire under a bar of lead, and once the lead is melted, pours it into his mouth, and it goes down into his stomach, burning his innards. The sages, however, hold that he should be choked a bit, because if he starts to die through choking, the lead will kill him more quickly. In this way, he will suffer less pain, because the pain of choking is less than the pain of burning. And the Rav tells us that Halakha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the Halakha follows the opinion of the Chachamim. The next Tana cites proof that execution by burning is very different from that described above. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok. Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok said, Maaseh bevat kohen achat shezinta. It happened that a certain Kohen's daughter committed adultery, which is punishable by burning, as it says in chapter 9, Mishnah 1 in Sanhedrin. V'kifua chavilei zmorot usrafua, and they surrounded her with bundles of branches and burned her by setting the branches on fire. Amrulo, however, the sages said to him, Bipnei shelo haya bedin shel otah she'a baki. That happened because the court of that time was not knowledgeable in the laws of the Torah, but in fact, the correct method is to pour lead, as the Mishnah said earlier. Now, it was a court of tzedukim who followed the literal meaning of the Torah. They therefore burned their body from the outside, since that is what burning usually means. The tzedukim rejected the laws taught to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai, according to which only the inside of the body should be burned, as we explained earlier. And that is that of Mishnah Bet. Mishnah Gimel describes the procedure for execution by beheading. Mitzvat Neragim. This is the procedure for those who have been sentenced to beheading. Hayu matizin et rosho b'saif keder shemalchut osa. They would cut his head off with a sword while he stood, just as the government does when it executes someone. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, however, Rabbi Yehuda says, Nivul huzeh, this kind of beheading is disgraceful because his headless body falls to the ground. Ela manichin et rosho ala sadan. Instead, when he is lying face down, we place his head on a block, the kotzetz bekofitz, and chop it off with an axe. Amrulo, the sages said to Rabbi Yehuda, En mita minuvelet mizo, there is no death more disgraceful than that. An axe breaks the bones at the back of the neck, making the corpse even more repulsive than it has to be. A sword, on the other hand, merely cuts the front of the neck, killing the person by severing his windpipe and his food pipe. For this reason, when a sword is used, the condemned must be erect with the front of his neck exposed. He cannot be lying face down on a block. In fact, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that beheading with an axe is repulsive. Nevertheless, he forbids using a sword in place of an axe, because the Canaanites beheaded criminals with the sword. The Torah states in Vaikra chapter 18 verse 3, you shall not follow the laws of the Canaanites. Although this verse refers to practice that relate to worshipping idols, the sages prohibited certain other Canaanite customs as well. To avoid copying the Canaanites, Rabbi Yehuda prohibits beheading with the sword and requires an axe to be used instead. Although Rabbi Yehuda said this kind of beheading with the sword is disgraceful, that was not his main reason to prohibit using a sword. Rather, he meant that beheading with a sword is also disgraceful, and so nothing is gained by using a sword. We should therefore use an axe instead to avoid copying the Canaanites. The sages, however, learned from verses in the Torah that beheading should be done with a sword. Therefore, the prohibition of copying the Canaanites does not apply, because we use a sword not to copy the Canaanites, but to follow the instructions of the Torah, as the Rav explains based on the Gemara in page 52b in Masechet Sanhedrin. And the Rav does tell us that Halacha follows the opinion of the Chachamim. The procedure for execution by strangling, mitzvat nechenakin. This is the procedure for those who have been sentenced to strangling. Hayu mishakein oto bezevel ad kubotav. They sink the criminal into a pile of manure until his knees, so that he cannot move his legs. If he moves around, he will suffer for longer than necessary. V'notnin tzuda kasha letoch haraka. They put a rough scarf inside a soft scarf. V'chorech ad tzavaro, and wind the scarves around his neck. Someone standing on one side pulls the scarves toward himself, and someone standing on the opposite side pulls them toward himself, until they have strangled him and his soul leaves his body. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.